As tired as it may be today, in the late 2000s, people couldn't get enough of the quote-unquote dark and gritty reboot. Most people agree that Batman Begins is what really popularized the trend, and just 1 year later, Eon Productions decided to try the same thing with their biggest property, James Bond. Funny enough, Bond and Batman were in pretty similar positions. Both had recently put out very over-the-top entries that weren't especially well received. I'm not as harsh on Die Another Day as some people are, but the fact is, Bond had a bit of an image problem, so the producers decided to wipe the slate clean, do a full reboot and adapt the very first Bond novel, Casino Royale. This year marks the 20th anniversary of Casino Royale, so I figured now was the perfect time to look back on it, its strengths, its weaknesses, and why it remains one of the most debated Bond movies ever made. But real quick, if you enjoy the video, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Starting with the plot, this is a full reboot. Bond has only recently earned the 007 designation, and his first major mission sends him to the titular Casino Royale in Montenegro. There, he must defeat terrorist banker Chiffre in a high-stakes poker game and force him to become an informant for MI6. And if your only exposure to Bond comes from parodies like Austin Powers, you might be surprised at how normal that sounds. Bond isn't trying to stop a laser from space, prevent a deadly virus, or stop a gold heist at Fort Knox. If he fails, Chiffre gets away to keep financing terrorists. Not something you're gonna put on your LinkedIn profile, sure, but also not exactly a doomsday scenario. That grounded tone defines the entire movie. The mission statement here was clear: strip away the excess. Take the gadgets. Bond's fanciest piece of technology in this movie is basically a first aid kit. The villain fits that philosophy too. Chiffre's just a guy who's pretty good with numbers and occasionally cries blood. Compared to villains with metal teeth, killer hats, and third nipples, he's downright ordinary. That's not criticism, by the way. I don't think it's physically possible for a villain played by Mikkelsen to be forgettable. But he's not some untouchable mastermind. The entire movie happens because he made a mistake, and we're constantly reminded that he's not the top dog here. The fact that Chiffre still feels dangerous despite all of that is a testament to Mikkelsen's sheer screen presence, although he does get a pretty memorable torture sequence. He strips Bond naked and proceeds to perform basically CBT on him. If you don't know what CBT stands for, God bless you. Considering the kind of twisted crap people online get off to, I'm sure someone has watched that part on repeat. I also suspect Daniel Craig is the one who insisted Bond be butt naked for the scene. Speaking of which, let's talk about the movie's biggest controversy, Daniel Craig himself. To this day, some old school fans still insist he's the worst Bond ever. I don't agree with that, but I also disagree with the people who say he's the best Bond. To me, Craig is good, but not perfect. The thing about 007 is that he's many different things, some of them contradictory. He needs to be a charming gentleman spy, a wisecracking action hero, and a cold-blooded government assassin. Sometimes all of those in the same scene. Craig absolutely nails the assassin part. You believe this man can and will put a bullet in someone's head if necessary. That edge also carries over into the action scenes, which are fantastic. The opening parkour chase is still one of the best in the franchise, and the whole film clearly takes inspiration from the Bourne movies. Handheld cameras, tighter framing, more physicality. It's not glamorous, and if you think that style doesn't quite fit Bond, I get it, but it's undeniably effective. Put it to you this way: watch a fight scene from this movie, then watch one from Quantum of Solace. If you can't tell Casino Royale has better action, I don't know what to tell you. Where Craig struggles a little more is with the whole gentleman spy side of Bond. You know the classic Bond entrance. He walks into a room like he owns it, perfectly tailored suit, not a hair out of place, looking more expensive than your house. Casino Royale gives Craig one of those moments, but it doesn't feel as natural as some of the other Bonds. He's charming, sure, just in a more rugged, less glamorous way. At the same time, Casino Royale also begins Craig's long-running attempt to make Bond more emotionally vulnerable. That'll produce some questionable results later, but here it actually works, mostly because of Vesper Lynd. And yes, one thing the producers wisely chose not to tone down was casting a scorching hot actress as the love interest. If Eva Green isn't the hottest Bond girl, she's at least in the top 5. And in a franchise built on gorgeous actresses, that's saying something. I mean, I got a soft spot for Daniela Bianchi. Denise Richards obviously deserves a mention. Carrie Lowell was also pretty cute, especially if you're into short-haired girls. Look, what I'm trying to say is, in an ocean of 10 out of 10 babes, Eva Green still stands out. Partially because of her looks, but also because of her relationship to Bond. Some of these movies try to convince you that the girl genuinely falls in love with Bond by the end, and about 99% of the time, it feels completely forced. Craig's later love interest, Madeline Swan, has that exact problem. But not Vesper. Their chemistry is immediate, especially during the train scene, and as the movie goes on, their romance actually becomes believable. You buy that these two people surviving all this insanity together might genuinely fall for each other. And that emotional credibility is what makes the ending work. But before we get there, we should talk about the script, because it's one of the movie's biggest strengths. The structure is surprisingly elegant. Act 1 introduces Bond, establishes Le Chiffre, and sets the mission in motion. Act 2 focuses on the poker game and is the movie's strongest section. And yes, if you know poker, you already know the hands these guys get are about as likely as finding a 4-leaf clover while Halley's Comet flies overhead. Mikkelsen himself has commented on that and, for some reason, keeps bringing up the fact that everybody at that table actually knew how to play poker. Everybody except Daniel Craig. Now, that is funny, but the cards themselves aren't the point. What matters is everything around them. The bluffing, the psychology, Bond identifying Le Chiffre's tell only to fall into a trap. There's more mind games than a divorce hearing. It's fantastic. And throughout all of this, the writers show real respect for the audience. What I mean is that the movie doesn't feel the need to spoon-feed you information. For example, Act 1 has Bond tracking down Le Chiffre's contact, who hired a bomber to destroy a plane. The movie never stops to explain everything that's going on. It just shows Bond doing his thing and expects you to keep up. And that matters because too many Bond movies forget that this guy is not just a blunt instrument, he's an elite intelligence operative, which means he needs to be kinda smart. Act 3 is, pound for pound, probably the weakest. Not because it's bad, but because once Le Chiffre's gone, the momentum dips. Suddenly, we're watching Bond and Vesper on what feels like a romantic summer vacation, while Bond talks about resigning from MI6, and the whole time you're just sitting there thinking, oh, sure, James Bond is totally retiring in this, the first movie of a rebooted series. I'm sure nothing bad's gonna happen. Naturally, it does. Vesper dies, killed by Smersh in the novel, Quantum here, but later they try to retcon it to say Spectre did it, but that whole mess can wait for another day. Point is, the emotional payoff lands. Bond discovers Vesper had been manipulated into betraying him to save her previous boyfriend, and for the first time, we see him truly heartbroken. And then comes that famous line, "The bitch is dead." Cold, and exactly the moment this version of Bond is born. And then, to top it off, the movie finally gives us the classic Bond theme. Oh, and speaking of themes, you know my name absolutely rules. It's adventurous, intense, and instantly memorable. Everything a Bond theme should be. Still in regular rotation on my gym playlist, right alongside a bunch of other Soundgarden tracks. Rest in peace, Chris Cornell. When people talk about Casino Royale, I often hear the phrase, "It's not a bad movie, it's just a bad Bond movie." And I understand that perspective. If your ideal Bond is more elegant, more playful, more old school, Craig's rougher, dirtier take may not be your thing. And that's perfectly fair. Hell, he's not my favorite Bond either. But Casino Royale still gets a lot right. The villain works, the Bond girl works, the action works, and most importantly, the reboot itself works. Was it the right move at that specific moment in the franchise's history? Absolutely. Is it the best Bond movie ever made? No. But it is an exceptionally well-made spy thriller with unmistakable Bond DNA, and the single best film of Daniel Craig's entire tenure as 007. This is 100% the movie I recommend starting with if you're a newcomer to the franchise. Older, hardcore fans might find some issues with it, but even most of them recognize it's a pretty good movie. So put on your tuxedo, don't give a damn about whether your martini is shaken or stirred, and play your cards right with Casino Royale. But how about you? Did you enjoy this movie? And would you like to see more Bond reviews on the channel? I'm actually a huge fan of the franchise, so I'd be more than happy to revisit it. Let me know in the comments. And as usual, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.